You have to prove yourself worthy. There's a lot of discipline in that life, a lot of authority, a lot of alleged respect. You had a meeting at 8 o'clock. If you weren't there at 7:30, you were late. You can never be late in that life, and you just had to follow the orders, whatever you were told to do. It's difficult for me to say this, but I like to be honest about it. That life at times is violent, and if you're part of that life, you're part of the violence. And it took me 2.5 years before I proved myself worthy, and it was actually Halloween night in 1975 when I took an oath and became a sworn made member of the Colombo family. When I first, after my dad proposed me, it was about 2 weeks later when an official in the family, a captain, picked me up, and he took me to see the boss. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but Joe Colombo had been shot, seriously wounded, at a big rally that we had in Columbus Circle back in 1971. He eventually died from the wounds, and I was about 12 steps away from him when that happened on the stage. It was kind of the first eye-opening experience that I had in that life. It was a new boss that had taken over. His name was Tom DeBella. Tom has passed on now. And he said to me, here's the deal. From now on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're on call to serve this family, the Colombo family. That means if your mother is sick and she's dying and you're at her bedside and we call you to service, you leave your mother's side, you come and serve us. From now on, we're number one in your life before anything and everything. And when and if we feel you deserve this privilege, this honor to become a member, we'll let you know. So from that moment on, you have to do whatever you're told to do to prove yourself worthy. And, there was a lot of menial things. There was times I had to drive the boss to a meeting. I sat in the car 2, 3, 4 hours, waited for him to come out. God forbid you leave, you go to the restroom, go get a newspaper, he comes out, you're not there, you're in trouble, stuff like that. I know I did that once and paid the price. I had a real tongue lashing. Just a lot of things like that. I learned to be a very good listener at that point, Jordan. I just listened and observed and seen what it was I need to do and what was it expected of me. And look, again, to be honest, there are times when you're called upon within that life to commit an act of violence. And if you're told to do it, you need to do it. Well, there's you kind of find your own level in that life, and I like to explain it this way. There was kind of two types of people in that life. You were either a racketeer or a gangster. A racketeer was a guy that knew how to use that life to benefit him in business and went out and made money, not only for himself, but for the family. And a gangster was someone that was just not capable of that, and they were kind of I guess you can call it a thug. They were the guys who did a lot of the street work. If you were a racketeer, you also had to be a gangster at certain times because you had to do that. That was something you had to do. But normally they tried to keep the guys that were earning money, earning money, because no organization survives without money. So I was fortunate. Like, I had a lot of bookmakers that were under my control because bookmakers weren't really allowed to operate on the street unless they were some way affiliated with organized crime. We wouldn't let them. I put out money on the street at usurious rates. People couldn't go to a bank, so they would come to me. We did that. And I was, again, I was very aggressive on the street. I worked very hard. And a lot of people would come to me with different schemes. There's a misconception that guys in that life sit in their social clubs and look at the next business that they're going to attack or infiltrate or corrupt in some way. And that happens on occasion, but normally it's someone from the business that would come to us and say, hey, we have a scheme to defraud our company or our business. Can you help us? And that happened to me quite often. I was a target of law enforcement from day one because my dad's name was so high profile. Throughout my time in that life, I had 18 arrests. They were on me all the time. I found out I also had 7 indictments. I had 5 state indictments, and I had 2 federal racketeering indictments, one that was brought on by Rudy Giuliani. And I went to trial 5 times. I was either dismissed or acquitted in every case. And so I constantly was under investigation. And on the other hand, when you're in that life, you're constantly watching out for the guy next to you because that's just the way the life goes. So law enforcement, they're corrupt. These are not good people. They framed my father. They put him in jail for a crime he didn't commit. It was very destructive to my family. We had I don't know any family of any member of that life, including my own, and not my wife and kids, thank God for that, but mother, father, brothers, and sisters, that hasn't been totally devastated. And I guess I blamed them in a big way early on. I wasn't blaming my father, I was blaming them. And so anytime I was able to get over them or fight with them or argue with them, I don't mean argue, verbal argue, but just I just did it. I went for it. It was very resentful on my part. I had a real resentment for
Oh, I see. Okay.
I've had many defining moments in my life, but when I stepped away from that life and walked away, I had a lot of trouble, Jordan. I mean, there was a contract on my life because you can't walk away from that life. And everybody thought the next step for me would be to be a cooperating witness, because that's what happens normally. People don't just walk away. So I was in prison at the time, and we can get into that, how that happened. But the law enforcement, the FBI came into the prison and said, there's a contract on your life. You're a dead man anyway. Cooperate with us. And they said, and your father went along with the contract. We got word from our informants. Now, I understood that. I understood that because sometimes in that life, if you propose somebody and that person becomes an informant, well, you could be held responsible. In my case, probably not with my dad because of his reputation there, but it was possible. So I understood what he was doing. Jordan, one of the horrors of that life is that you make a mistake, your best friend walks you into a room and you don't walk out again. And there was a night when I had that experience. There was a lot of talk about me on the street. I had a very big crew at that time. We were making a lot of money. There was a publication, I think it was Newsday, that wrote a story that said I was getting powerful enough to break away from the Colombo family and start my own family. There was no truth to it. It was a fictional story, but you know how the media is. And so guys on the street start to get a little bit nervous of that, especially my boss at the time. So without going into all the details, unless you wanted me to, I was walked into a room one night, and I didn't think I was going to walk out again. And it was one of the scariest times of my life.
Given everything you've told me so far, is that the people who were involved in that life set up a morality of, it's something like a morality of patriarchal loyalty that goes above all else, is that there are like military style obedience is required, and that all morality is therefore now a consequence of abiding by the rules of the game. Mm-hmm. And that would mean you sacrifice your personal happiness, you sacrifice the stability of your family, you might even sacrifice the relationship you have with your son. But the manner in which you're moral is to abide by the code of the family. And that sounds like what's inculcated. Does that seem accurate?
Absolutely, absolutely.